This place is probably worth $100 million by now.
This is Good Morning Liberty.
Well, what is up, all of our liberty-loving friends? This is another fantastic episode of Good Morning Liberty. My name is Nate Thurston. Across from me is Mr. Charles Chuck Thompson. How's it going today, Chuck?
Living the dream.
Happy Thursday to you.
Yeah.
Glad to be here. Are you happy to be here?
I am. I'm wearing my military hoodie again.
I like that hoodie. It's nice. Yeah. I like that pattern. You still got your Carhartt hat on.
Yeah.
So it's good to describe, for people who are just listening on their podcast app, what we look like right now. I'm wearing a full suit. And
full Beck suit. Yeah.
And Charlie's over here wearing a hoodie and a hat. So you know which one of us is the professional.
Nate is big ag.
Big ag.
Big ag. So
not the biggest ag, but pretty big ag.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that kind of thing. All right. Well, this is Good Morning Liberty. We talk about life, liberty, and the pursuit of meeting every single day of the week when we want to. Hit follow, subscribe, do all of those things. Watch the episodes on YouTube if you want to do that. Or just leave a rating and review on your podcast app. Let the algorithms know that you like it. 5 stars if you like it. Don't do anything that I just said to do if you don't. So yesterday, we were fairly critical of the Trump administration. And today, I figure since yesterday was bad Trump, I figured we'd do good Trump. So we're doing a kind of a good Trump, bad Trump kind of thing. And so, just to be fair, as we possibly can be for good Trump, bad Trump, this story from the New York Times is making its way around right now, and it's entitled, "Trump Waved Off Israeli Strike After Divisions Emerged in His Administration." And of course, one of the big critiques of the Trump administration is that they are completely beholden to Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel. In fact, we've had guests on the show before.
Got him by the balls.
Who have made this point, like Scott Horton. Had a great clip from the interview with Scott. Doesn't mean that he's not, or that they haven't done some things that we're annoyed about, like, some of the free speech things on college campuses and stuff like that. We haven't exactly agreed on. But in this case, it seems like Trump still doesn't want to go to war with Iran for Israel. And so or for anyone else for that matter. It seems like he still doesn't want to do it. That's good. Because I made a meme that said, regardless, we're going to go to war with Iran. It didn't matter if Trump, didn't tilt his head at that Butler rally, or if he did. Either way, the United States is going to war with Iran. I hope to God I'm wrong about that. And if we are wrong about that, that's a good thing to be wrong about.
As of right now, it seems like you're wrong.
Currently.
But it does look.
As of today.
Like there are people who want to do it.
Oh, there's always people. There's people who have just spent their entire lives wanting to do this.
What we can surmise from this are the folks that want to do it, they're part of the deep state.
Sure, yeah.
So whoever advocated for it, we need to figure those people out, and they need to be outed.
Let's fire those people.
Yes.
Instead of going after the people who don't want to do it. So from this article from the New York Times, Israel had planned to strike Iranian nuclear sites as soon as next month, but was waved off by President Trump in recent weeks in favor of negotiating a deal with Tehran to limit its nuclear program. According to administration officials and others briefed on the discussions, Mr. Trump made his decision after months of internal debate over whether to pursue...
I hate that. It's President Trump.
Well, they do it with everyone, though.
Do they?
They actually do.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
They actually do. Yeah. At first I thought, but they do the same thing for Biden and everyone. They'll say Mr. Biden on stuff. So yeah, it's not just it's not what you think, as I'll put it that way. President Trump made his decision after months of internal debate over whether to pursue diplomacy or support Israel in seeking to set back Iran's ability to build a bomb at a time when Iran has been weakened militarily and economically. The debate highlighted fault lines between historically hawkish American cabinet officials and other aides more skeptical that a military assault on Iran could destroy the country's nuclear ambitions and avoid a larger war. It resulted in a rough consensus, for now, against military action. I hope that's something that we can all get behind. I think everyone listening to this show can get behind not going to war with Iran. Of course, Israel would portray this as, well, we're just going to bomb them. We're going to take out their nuclear sites, and then nothing else is going to happen after that. They'll just be weakened. Their nuclear facilities will be destroyed. and then everyone will live happily ever after that. But of course, that's not what would happen. Israeli officials have recently developed plans to attack the nuclear sites in May. They're prepared to carry them out, and at times were optimistic that the U.S. would sign off. The goal of the proposals, according to officials, was to set back Tehran's ability to develop a nuclear weapon by a year or more. So they just want to delay them by a year or more. That's it. And we'll bomb those new facilities a year or more later.
Wait till they get really good and ready.
Yeah. Almost all of the plans would have required U.S. help, not just to defend Israel from Iranian retaliation, but also to ensure that an Israeli attack was successful, making the U.S. a central part of the attack itself. So, yeah, we would have had to do that. But Mr. Trump has chosen diplomacy over military action. In his first term, he tore up the Iran nuclear deal negotiated by the Obama administration. But in the second term, eager to avoid being sucked into another war in the Middle East, of course, Douglas Murray would say we haven't been at war in the Middle East. You haven't been at war in the Middle East. We just got bogged down, in war. He has opened negotiations with Tehran, giving a deadline of just a few months to negotiate a deal. And then they go into why.
Now, the Fed Haters Club is saying attacking Iran would be so stupid. That's true.
Yeah.
It is stupid. But you have to understand, I think that this is important. Something that Scott Horton brought up, that even former department officials have brought up, Department of Defense officials have brought up, is that there is a memo that went out in the 90s, the 7 countries in 5 years.
It's
memo.
on the list, and we haven't hit it yet.
Iran's the last one.
And we
on
still got to topple.
And this is a plan
again
from Israel and other United States officials that's been going on since the 90s. And there's people way smarter than me that have surfaced up the memo and all the discussions that have happened. You can listen to Scott Horton. Dave Smith talks about it. I'm not as good. I don't know the names.
So now you trust those officials,
Trust who?
Libertarian, the people who wrote that memo. I'm just saying.
I don't trust them. I'm not saying I trust them.
You're bringing up the memo they wrote. So as a libertarian, you must be saying that you trust them.
Oh, whatever, Douglas. Shut your mouth. You shut your mouth when you're talking to me. Drink your tea, okay? I've got important stuff I'm talking about here. But of course it would be stupid, but here's the thing, is that this plan has been looming for 30 years now, 30 plus years, and they're still trying to get that last one out of there.
And they're going to keep trying.
They're going to keep trying.
This doesn't end it right here, but it does sort of signal that Trump still sees this as a bad idea, and that's a good thing. That's why it's good Trump, bad Trump, and today's good Trump. There were many reasons that Israeli officials expected Mr. Trump to take an aggressive line. In 2020, he ordered the killing of Qasem Soleimani, the commander of Iran's most elite military unit, and Iran sought to hire hitmen to assassinate Mr. Trump during last year's presidential campaign. We brought that up several times. Whether or not that was even true, it could have been, for all we know. Could have been the deep state doing it and then saying that it was Iran.
Could have been intelligence officials just
to try and get Trump to want to go to war with Iran. But inside the Trump administration, some officials were becoming skeptical. In a meeting this month, one of several discussions about the Israeli plan, Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, presented a new intelligence assessment that said the buildup of American weaponry could potentially spark a wider conflict with Iran that the United States did not want. Thank you, Tulsi, for getting in there and potentially being the person to stop this. Wish she would have said the same thing
about the Houthis. Yeah. I just reprimanded her. Was that yesterday?
Yesterday, I
just
think
yesterday.
You did. Yeah.
And she swoops in and saves the day now. Maybe now it's even.
It wasn't just
she
her.
She had
though.
a negative one and now a positive one.
It's a pretty big positive, though.
Yeah, so now those cancel each other out.
You let the Houthis thing happen, but then you prevent the war with Iran. I mean, that's a pretty big positive to that negative. It might be more points in the positive still.
Oh, so she's like half a point up.
Yeah, something like that. She's barely positive. It's like we're playing bags right now, honestly. And
we're playing Battleship.
Yeah,
this is Battleship.
A range of officials echoed Ms. Gabbard's concerns in the various meetings. Susie Wiles, the White House Chief of Staff, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and Vice President J.D. Vance all voiced doubts about the attack. I would like to see the signal chat about this, honestly. I want to see the chat.
So we know
this is the kind of signal chat that you want a reporter to be involved in, by the way. They really screwed up by not getting a reporter into this signal chat right here.
Susie, Pete, JD, wow.
Yeah.
So we know
And Tulsi.
we know Waltz is the problem then.
No, they say even Mr. Waltz, frequently one of the most hawkish voices on Iran, was skeptical that Israel's plan could succeed without substantial American assistance. He was skeptical that we weren't going to help them enough, and he wanted to help them more, of course, would be the thing.
So he's the problem.
And by the way, Trump kind of...
By the way, I think he's the rat. He's a rat.
I feel like he needs to go.
He's a rat.
I'm kind of fine with him going.
This is a guy who probably purposely leaked the Signal chat, considering he has all these reporters in his phone.
No,
he's probably leaking information.
They somehow got sucked into his phone.
He's a deep state rat.
Yeah.
This is a mole. I can smell it.
Benjamin Netanyahu arrived in Washington on April 7th. While the trip was presented as an opportunity for him to argue against Trump's tariffs, the most important discussion for the Israelis was their planned strike on Iran.
Of course.
Yeah.
Under the mask of tariffs.
But while Netanyahu was still at the White House, Trump publicly announced the talks with Iran. I think maybe Netanyahu didn't know about that, and Trump waited until Netanyahu was there to announce that they were actually going to pursue diplomacy
and
with
this is
Iran.
what I still like about Trump.
Yeah.
You know, I think these moves are calculated.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I think so. In private discussions,
just like when he talked about taking Gaza, Netanyahu was like,
"Yeah,
that's such a surprise look."
And he's like, "It's going to be ours." By the way, it's not even going to be yours. It's going to be ours. In private discussions, Trump made clear to Netanyahu that he would not provide American support for Israeli attack in May while the negotiations were playing out, according to officials. The next day, Trump suggested that an Israeli military strike against Iran remained an option. See, this is the thing about negotiating, and I'm not one of these guys who's like, oh, Trump is always doing 5D chess. I think the tariff thing kind of blew up in his face. I don't think that there was a for sure plan on this. It's not always 5D chess, but you do always have to remember that he's negotiating. So while he says like, yeah, we're not going to provide support for these attacks, he's also saying, but an attack is still on the table, just so you guys know, because when you're negotiating, you do not want to take the options off of the table. And I guess that goes all the way up to negotiating the terms of war in deals like this. Like, you don't want to take your biggest chip off the table when you're negotiating with a country. Like, hey, one of the things we could do is I could blow you up. You will be dead. Okay? Yeah. Just keep that in mind while we're negotiating back and forth, passing deals across the table.
Do you want us to support the Israelis? Because they really want to bomb you. And they can't do it without us.
Yeah, yeah. So
I'm willing to join them if you don't sign this deal.
That's that story. I just figured, yesterday we did a whole episode negative about Trump and the things that we're doing with some of these deportations directly to a prison. And then today, when something good happens, when you mention the good thing as well, because that's a good thing, And,
it's about remaining principled.
Just principles.
Yeah.
All the time.
And Douglas Murray made a joke about libertarians being bisexual, playing both sides.
Yeah.
It's actually the opposite of that. It's like we're the true principled folks.
Yeah, it looks like you're playing both sides, but actually sometimes some people are right and sometimes the other people are right.
No, it's actually...
this side's not always right and this side's not always right.
Well, actually, I would disagree with that. And I would say that both sides are illogical.
Well, yeah.
They don't have any base principle. It's like whatever they feel in the moment.
But they're accidentally right sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, Trump just makes decisions. It might be a true democracy, by the way. He just makes decisions based on whether it's popular with America or not.
Yeah.
You know?
A lot of times he does.
Supporting Israel is probably still a 60-40 or 70-30 type of move. Otherwise, he wouldn't be removing people from campuses. And, of course, deportation, I mean, that's obviously an 80-20 issue.
Well, there was just new polling. I think it was going around this morning, a CNN clip about it, showing that still 56% of Americans support deporting all illegal immigrants. Now, you could ask that question more specifically. Do you support sending them directly to prison for the rest of their lives, where they have no contact with family or lawyers and we have no clue what's going on? That would probably poll lower than deporting all of the illegal immigrants, I would say. But as far as deporting everyone who's here illegally, 56% of Americans still support doing that right now.
And I guarantee you, if that drops below 50, Trump will start to tamp down a little bit.
He might. When he was in 2016, they showed it was like 38% of Americans supported that. Now it's 56%. Of course, that's after 4 years of Biden just giving people free rides up to Kansas or whatever. And so, people's minds have changed on it. We made it to a totally different portion of today's podcast, one that I definitely will be mentioned for Dumb Bleep tomorrow. But the last couple Dumb Bleeps, if it's your first day of listening, by the way, we do something called Dumb Bleep of the Week every week. And we go through like 10 really dumb things. The live group, Fed Haters Club, they vote on it. Well, this clip from Bill Burr is definitely going to be there, but it's a 5-minute clip. And we've gotten bogged down on a couple issues in the last two dumb bleeps where we weren't able to make it through the whole list. And so what I was thinking is today we really get our thoughts out there on this clip and spend the time necessary to talk about it. And tomorrow we could be like, all right, here's this thing, short couple lines about it, refer to yesterday's episode for what, our full conversation on the matter. That way we don't spend 25 minutes on one single topic tomorrow like we have the last couple
You mean
weeks.
like 45?
Yeah. Well, the first one was the tariffs, and that's all we did for the
that
thing.
one won.
Last week was was the debate, the Smith-Murray debate. Yeah.
Yeah, we only had 5.
Here's this clip from Bill Burr, comedian. He's just a comedian.
Not an expert.
Yeah, he's not an expert. All right, so, take everything he says with a grain of salt, but also he must be very correct about everything. By the way, the comment on this was from David Sirota. Here's the great Bill Burr in his last podcast episode explaining oligarchy and the whole trade policy debate in a more simple, easy to understand way than most professional politicians. Professional politicians. That's a weird... That's a weird way of saying that.
Yeah.
Well, let's listen to what Bill Burr had to say.
Like, by the way, I know everyone was freaking out about all that tariff stuff and all of that and what it was doing to the stock market. And then everybody jumped in and it looked like just this big manipulation of the market so that rich people could get even richer. And then, poor people could still chant USA, USA at a UFC event. I literally do not understand what's going on. First of all, I might be wrong on this. This whole idea that other countries stole our jobs,
well, no,
like our factory jobs and all that, as far as I remember, that's not the case. Here's a little quick history from someone who doesn't read a lot. In the 1800s, during the, what was that period called? The Industrial Revolution. They had like kids working in factories, like fucking 12, 14-hour days, like 4 or 5-year-old kids in dangerous situations.
So I want to take this piece by piece right now. So now he's talking about the trade war, jobs getting stolen, going overseas, other countries stealing our jobs. And then he talks about, now he's going into the Industrial Revolution. And as a emotional talking point to start talking about the Industrial Revolution, he's like, they had
Child labor,
kids working in factories, and
4 and 5 years old.
there's something that we do that's incorrect when we look at things in history, and that's addressing it through the lens of the way that we do things right now and the world that we live in right now. Okay, so when you go back and you talk about how they had child labor in these factories, you got to go back to the way things were at that time. And the way things were at that time, well, first off, this Industrial Revolution, it's a period in history for a reason, because before that, your job was farming, or you could shoe horses, or you could do whatever little jobs or whatever. And guess what? Your kids worked. As soon as your kids could carry something or
they were
do
out
anything,
making moonshine.
They were working.
Yeah.
They were making moonshine. They were farming. They were doing whatever because they had to.
Otherwise,
for your family to survive.
Otherwise, you died.
You had to do it. Okay?
Yes.
And so when these factories started up, of course, kids went and worked because kids worked this time.
And that was that way. By the way, it's only recently that hasn't been the case. Kids have worked for, I don't know, all of human history.
All of human history.
Literally.
Until
40, 50,000 years.
Until like the early 1900s, children have worked up until then. And of course, they still work in other countries today. But for human beings, all throughout history, up until the early 1900s, it was kids worked because if they didn't, your family would starve. Because you only ate stuff that you grew yourself. So kids had to go farm, or you had to do other jobs so you could get food. And yes, you had to do it. So going back and chastising these people for having kids working in factories, it's a non-argument. is what it is.
Yeah.
It's an actual non-argument.
Also, did he visit those factories?
Well, you can't time travel. Okay. All right. Let's listen to a little more.
Nowadays, like 4 or 5-year-old kids in dangerous situations, and people weren't making any money. And the one guy who owned the factory was keeping all the money. These robber barons.
That's not true either, by the way.
Who all should be in fucking...
The reason kids were working in these factories and people were working in these factories because they were making more money than they were farming. It was better for them.
If you went there and you didn't make any money, that would have just been pure slavery. Like you did, first off, you did make money when you went there. The guys weren't keeping...
Just like what's happening today when they say, oh, slave labor in these factories overseas. It's not true. The reason why those people work in those factories is because that's better than going to the rice fields.
It's their best option that they have. That's why they go and do it. The margins for people like Andrew Carnegie were big. They were big compared to what we have today. It was anywhere from 20% to 40% net profit margins for people like Carnegie. Maybe you could say that was exploitation and cheap labor and stuff like that.
Rockefeller was running like 8%, right?
I didn't look up Rockefellers. I don't know.
I think it's somewhere around there because what Rockefeller did was he kept chipping away to make it as cheap as possible so he could take over the whole industry, which was smart.
And Carnegie was doing the same thing with, and so it's important to also remember what it was like at that time, and that we were in this was a new era. There wasn't like a roadmap for doing this. This was an industrial revolution. It was like uncharted territory at this time. Not only had the people never gone and done stuff like this, the people who were running these businesses didn't have anything to base anything off of either. We were coming out of a large farming society or whatever things it was that other people did. 40% profit margins, we could say that that's bad or that it was exploitative or whatever. I think the best thing would have been for them to have as much competition as possible and go get better jobs. People would eventually offer better wages to people, and that is eventually what happened. People would eventually offer better wages to people. But you can't look at things from the way that things are done today and judge people in the way that they were doing it in the mid-1800s, late 1800s at that time. It's just not the right way to do it at all. He's going to talk about...
I bring this up all the time. I think it was Jeffrey Sachs who did a really good... there's several good videos of him where he talks about even in today, in your environment, like you can't sit in the Western world from your pompous ivory towers and look down upon, China or Taiwan or whatever in Vietnam and be like, oh, look at those slave laborers that are taking advantage of these people. You can't sit from your ivory tower and look back at history or other places that are doing things differently because you were once there before too. And you have to make your way through these time periods. The other thing to remember is prior to 1900, even in the richest places in the entire world, okay, even in America, 95% of people, I got to adjust for inflation now, lived on less than $1.50 in today's money.
Yeah.
A day.
Well, that's because they were getting exploited. See how easy it would be so much easier to argue from the left all the time.
It would.
It would be so much easier.
Feelings.
All right, we're a minute in.
In jail. But politicians don't make any money, and they own the factory, was keeping all the money. These robber barons.
Then give your money away, Bill.
Jail. But politicians don't make any money, and they just throw them money, so they are on the legal side of stealing. No one's ever gone to jail for being a robber baron.
I do have to mention that he just said that the robber barons were on the legal side of stealing because politicians, get money from them, and so the politicians aren't going to put them in jail. I mean, the politicians are actually on the legal side of stealing, like literal stealing. They would take money from you, and if you don't give it to them, they'll put you in prison. All right. The robber barons created industries that had never existed before, brand new industries. No roadmap, no history to look back on for doing this.
Which, by the way, everyone benefits from today.
Yeah, and they were the first. They were the first to it, and of course, they were very successful because, good Lord.
But also, you have to remember, lots of them weren't successful.
Oh, yeah. We only know about the ones that were.
Look at there's a funny video. I can't remember what it is, but look back at a lot of inventions that didn't make it. Okay, there were lots of people who were trying to do things that didn't catch.
Mm-hmm.
All right, they lost their life savings. Just like businesses today, most of them fail. Okay, same thing was happening back in the 1800s. And so all these people were taking massive risks. Like you said, no roadmap. They have no idea what was going to happen. They're risking their entire wealth and all kinds of things to what? To hopefully make a life a little bit better.
Yeah.
And by the way, it worked.
My
God, there's never been a better time to be alive. We're sleeping on the backs of people in the 1800s, these robber barons who decided to risk everything to create. Look around, Jesus Christ!
We are so capitalist that if like Andrew Carnegie or Rockefeller or any of them walked in, like I would just want to say thank you to them.
Yes,
hey, thank you for doing this. You helped create the world that we're in right now,
especially in America. God, almost everyone, like, you sleep in a house. These giant cabins.
By the way, you could get steel for cheaper from Britain at that time. They were making it cheaper, but we had such high tariffs on them that it actually helped Carnegie make more money and charge higher prices and make higher margins on stuff because we had big tariffs on steel from outside the United States. Mm-hmm. So just a little aside there for you.
We also didn't have income tax.
Yeah.
Then either. So.
Okay, we're a minute 21 seconds in.
Being a robber baron. Anyway. So the working man finally has enough. They start organizing unions. The robber barons hire police, the army, all of these people to come in and kill these people in riots, crack their skulls, do unbelievable sorts of damage to them to try and force them to go back to work for sweatshop wages. These people died, were maimed, catastrophic fucking injuries so that we could have a decent wage in this country. And they had unions and all of that. So then there was like a 40...
All right, so the idea that these people created unions, and so the robber barons hired hitmen to go after them and kill a bunch of these people is sort of brushing over a little bit of the context of the situation. Just so you know, like there was one called the Homestead Strike that I think was in 1892. This was a strike against Carnegie. And this was 700 of the 3,800 workers were actually unionized at this mill. But they actually formed a blockade, essentially created like a fortress around the mill and prevented anyone from going into it. The striking workers did.
The other 2,500.
The other workers, the other
31.
3,100 workers who wanted to go to work. And they created a blockade and defended it like a fortress to prevent anyone from going to work there, and eventually armed themselves like a military around the building, which, by the way, seizing someone else's private property and doing this, even if you don't like the wages they were paying or whatever, it doesn't give any of these people the right to essentially seize the private property. And so what happened was Carnegie hired these people called the Pinkertons, to like a private security force to go and liberate
his property,
his own property from the people. And there ended up being a really bloody battle. Okay, there was also a big railroad strike. The striking workers had actually blocked all of the railroad lines. They had blocked anyone else from operating the trains. And so whatever you think about the conditions or whatever, in these situations, there were a majority of the workers who still wanted to work. And these people created blockades and themselves riots, stuff like that, to seize private property from the business owners and prevent them from being able to do any business. Okay, so the way that now, as I give you a little bit of context on this, let's listen one more time to how he describes the situation.
In riots, crack their skulls, hire police is enough. They start organizing unions. The robber barons hire police, the army, all of these people to come in and kill these people in riots, crack their skulls, do unbelievable sorts of damage to them to try and force them to go back to work for sweatshop wages. These people...
No, they were not trying to force those people to go back to work for sweatshop wages, which, by the way, every single place was a sweatshop because fucking air conditioning had not been invented yet. Okay?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So you got a little sweaty at work.
Yes, it was sweaty.
Yeah.
It was a literal sweatshop because no one even knew what air conditioning was. It hadn't been invented yet.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one
Maybe
thing.
it had been thought of.
But it was not to force these people. It was to allow the other people who wanted to go to work there to go to work. All right.
They did have big-ass fans, though.
Yeah, they probably have big. That business has probably been around for a long time.
Yeah.
were maimed catastrophic fucking injuries so that we could have a decent wage in this country. And they had unions and all of that. So then there was like a 40, 50-year period where being a middle-class person, middle-class white person, was the dream. You know, because there was still racism, classism, and all of that shit, right? Well, middle class is a class. You know what I mean? There was still racism, okay? And then what happened was eventually these corporations just got sick of dealing with these unions and their hard-nosed negotiating and all that. And then they just said, well, fuck you then.
I like their hard-nosed negotiating, you know, like firebombing buildings and, you know, car bombs and stuff like that.
And as Jake points out from the Fed Haters Club, this was the fight for 50 cents an hour.
Yeah.
If they could just get 50 cents an hour, they'd be set.
Then they'd be fine.
Then they could support their family of 18.
Then they'd be enough.
You keep your factory, we're leaving. And they took their factories outside of the U.S. and went back to 1800 wages. In Mexico, China, wherever the hell they're building them. So then what happened was once people realized that that was happening, there was this pushback. This is how it happened during my lifetime. People were like, what the fuck? You should be making those things here. And then what the corporate guy said was, well, you know, we would make sneakers here, but if to pay the American worker and everything, the sneakers would then, instead of costing $50, they'd now cost $700. And I was always thinking, why? It would cost $700. I can't afford that. And what it really was they weren't going to lose the profit of sweatshop labor. So if they came back to America, we weren't going to work for that. So, and they weren't going to lose the profit of sweatshop labor, so they were going to pass it on to the consumer. That's
all right. I just I know that he's not a professional mathematician or an economist or anything like that. The numbers he just threw out there, which let's just be charitable. He's just throwing out numbers. Okay, that's fine. I just want to be clear that you have people like David Sirota, who's actually a really big voice on the left. I think runs David Sirota, Lever News, maybe. I think that's who that is. Really big voices on the left pointing out like, oh yeah, he just makes the point so much better than a professional politician, someone who makes money from politicking would do.
Yeah.
And so he says, well, the reason it won't be 50, it'll be 700 is because they want to keep their profits. Well, by the way, even if all of that $50 sneaker were profits, that wouldn't mean it would be 700. So there's something else going on here. Nike, for instance, which is who he's probably talking about, makes a 9% net profit margin on all the stuff that they sell. And so all in selling, paying people to sell it, paying people to make it, materials and all that, they might be paying something like $43 for that $50 sneaker all in cost for that sneaker, you know? That includes the Americans in a storefront to sell it to people and everything too. And so what they want to keep is that 9% profit margin on something. They want to keep that 9% number to keep operating, which I mean, the profit that they're actually concerned about on that $700 shoe would be something like $70, something like that. Actually less than that, less than that. And so if they got rid of their robber baron profit margin, sweatshop labor profit margin, then what they're saying is, well, it would be like a $630 shoe. instead. And then I guess everyone would be fine with that afterwards. So just the numbers he's throwing out there are just are wild. I wanted to,
because you can't afford a $700 pair of sneakers, but you can't afford $630 pair of sneakers.
Yeah, and that would be no profit for them. So
exactly.
That's what the fuck happened. So all of this talk that, you know, Mexico stole our jobs, China stole our jobs, they didn't steal the jobs. They were exploited by the super rich cunts that are not patriots in this country. They're not. They're pieces of shit. So that's what the fuck happened. So, and then here we are all of these years later.
I also don't like the idea that these people are being exploited. When a factory, let's say that they did move to Mexico because they could get cheaper labor and less regulations or whatever when they move down there, those people aren't being exploited. If they were, they'd just keep on working wherever they're working. They're like, hey, I love my freaking job. And like, oh, wait, I think I should leave and go get exploited over there.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome. I want to go. I'm loving this field I'm working in right here. But what I feel is that I want to go get exploited in that sweatshop over there. Now, they went there because it was their best opportunity that they could have. And it's actually been really good for a lot of these areas to have these factories.
The problem is Bill he's just been infected. He's
like
infected with the woke mind virus.
Was he always this bad on everything? I
No,
feel like a
he
switch
wasn't.
really flipped on this guy.
Yeah.
He just consumed way too much. The problem, you know, Bernie Sanders can be fine in moderation, but he consumed way too much Bernie Sanders at one time. You know, and like anything, it's fine in moderation, but when you do too much at one time, it can get pretty bad for you. And so I think that's what happened. He's got a little bit here about the money in the stock market too. Let's hear that
Later, in an effort to get, you know, this labor to come back, we're somehow trying to punish these other countries who've been suffering with sweatshop labor from a handful of super rich people from this country that fucked everyone in this country and every other country that they went to around the world, making America look bad.
But I can't even, we can't go 20 seconds. Does any of this make any sense to you? To like these countries have been suffering from this. Do you think that we went in there with the military and installed a Nike dictatorship in China and rounded people up and took them on buses and trains into the Nike factory? Okay, maybe that's happened a couple times in China. Okay, it's a bad example. They moved to Vietnam. Okay, is that what you guys think has happened? That like. Well, I feel like if Vietnam has been suffering under the regime of Nike this whole time, they'd be like, you know what, Nike, you guys can go.
It's roving bands of armed capitalists.
It is. It's just this stuff makes no sense at all.
What do? They divide us. They have the American worker who's getting fucked, mad at the whatever other worker around the world who's also getting fucked, actually getting fucked worse, getting sweatshop slave wages. So I really believe that was happening. And I don't understand what that whole fucking thing was, but all I know is once again, the market tanked and a bunch of rich people, right before they turned it back on again, went in and made a ridiculous amount of money, and they're all high-fiving with each other. And I don't know, this guy told me something a long time ago. He says, when you watch the stock market and they go like, up $2 billion was lost today. He's like, money isn't lost. Like, where did it go? That's just how they frame it. It isn't lost. It changes hands. All right, that's enough of that shit.
Okay, completely wrong about that last part, for sure.
Also, I just want everyone, just so they have some relevance, is that according to Online, Bill Burr has a net worth of around $20 million.
Yeah. Well, he's poor.
Well, net worth is usually always underestimated by these folks. He probably has that in the bank.
Yeah, I don't know what he's actually got, but
and just so you know, his speaking fee is around $200,000 and above.
Yeah, I'm sure he makes sure that the guy who takes out the trash at the venue gets paid the same.
Yeah,
for while he's there.
So it's like for this guy to talk about, people making, sweatshop wages. Where he's sitting in his ivory tower, it's insane. He has no idea what it's like. He talks on stage for an hour, and gets paid $200,000+ to do it. You know,
I mean, he makes way more money from a show, but than
well,
200,000. You know,
well, I'm just saying $200,000 an hour.
yeah. But that's all. You know, that's all fine.
Which
I
is
don't
fine.
care.
I'm not even mad about
I
that.
don't care if he makes $1 billion and
Yeah.
one. And he's the problem with what he just said about the stock market. I'm not sure if you, if everyone picked up on what he was saying there at the end. Is that somehow all these rich people got in essentially last week when it moved up a bunch and they made a couple $1 billion or whatever it was. By the way, you didn't have to be a well-connected rich person to know that it was a good time to buy some stocks last week. I bought into the S&P last week, and I bought leveraged into the S&P on Monday last week. And I'm not rich. I'm not an insider or whatever. I just know how to look at charts, and I guarantee you a bunch of these rich people also know how to look at charts, and they probably pay people who also know how to look at charts too. And many people in the market knew, like, hey, we're coming down to an area where something big's about to happen. It's probably going to go up from this point. Doesn't mean it's going to keep going up. It hasn't just kept going up since then, but it was an obvious time to buy last week. But then the other thing that he says at the end is, let me hear how he says it again.
And a bunch of rich people, right before they turned it back on again, went in and made a ridiculous amount of money, and they're all high-fiving with each other. And
now, the ridiculous amount of money they made was about half as much as what they had lost in the previous 5 or 6 weeks before that, just so you know. They gained back about half what had been lost.
They're still down.
And then they're still down right now, and then they've kept losing. Since that day, the market has not gone above what we hit that one day. It's just been down since then. So they've continued losing money since that time afterwards. All right. But they're doing this funny thing, which was in Dumb Bleep of the Week last week. We didn't have time to talk about it. Like that Robert Reich pointed out how much money everyone made on whatever
day.
Wednesday or whatever day it was that happened. I'm like, they lost twice that much in the month beforehand. They just made back half of what they lost, and you're pointing out that they made that right there without pointing out like it was the biggest wealth gain in market history for billionaires. You know what had come first? The biggest losses in history ever for billionaires had happened a couple weeks before that.
Yeah.
That's not what we were talking about.
We can't talk about that.
And then the last thing he says is completely wrong.
And I don't know, this guy told me something a long time ago. He says, when you watch the stock market and they go like, up $2 billion was lost today. He's like, money isn't lost. Like, where did it go? That's just how they frame it. It isn't lost. It changes hands. All right, that's enough of that shit.
So
hang on, though. If it's not lost, how is it gained?
It's also not gained. Yes. So that's one. Number one, if there are two big problems, number one is it's not lost also means it's not gained. So
that just flew right over his bald head, didn't it?
And then, well, it's easy for stuff to slip over that thing.
Yeah.
And so the other thing is money is lost. Like I mean, of course, if you don't sell, then did you actually lose any money? Like, no, it's a dollar value placed on an asset that you have. And the asset that you have is a piece of paper saying that you own a part of a corporation or whatever the case may be.
Anymore.
You know, it's not even a piece it's something in a computer saying that you own a portion of a corporation. And that's it. It's a dollar value of an asset. Okay. And so you own that portion. If you don't sell, you don't actually take whatever the loss is. But money does actually just evaporate from the market. It's not like the stock market is worth $1 trillion right now. It's worth way more, but it's worth $1 trillion right now. And when you see that all these people lost money and all that, it's still worth $1 trillion, but that money's just been shifted around the people. That's not the case at all. The market becomes worth a lot less. Let me tell you this right now. Charlie, how much would you pay for this cup right here? Pay me. I own this cup as an asset. It's a great cup. It's Velomix. Okay, got it on Amazon. How much would you like to pay for this cup?
$0.
$0?
Yeah.
Okay, if you had to buy it though, like you want this cup, but so you got to make me an offer.
It's used. You haven't even cleaned it.
I'll put it through a dishwasher first. It's fine. How much would you pay for this?
25 cents.
25 cents.
Yeah.
Now I still have this asset that I paid about $7 for. Okay, it's right here, and I paid about $7 for it. My standing offer for this asset is now 25 cents. Okay. No one else
zero first.
No one else is wanting to offer me more than 25 cents for this cup right now. There could be some more people that come in the auction in the Fed Haters Club that say that they want, and maybe they want the leftover coffee because it's a part of Nate and they want it as like a souvenir. I'll sign it. You know, that's
You'll
fine.
sign the liquid coffee.
I'll sign the coffee. Yeah. Okay, so maybe they want to do that, but right now I got to offer 25 cents or whatever. So now, like, what is the value of this cup? Like, it has value to me, and it's got the value that I paid for it, everything. But the standing market value of this, considering the fact that the market value of something is what someone else will pay for it, the market value of this cup is currently 25 cents. That doesn't mean that $6.75 changed hands and went somewhere else or whatever. It means that the value that I paid for this has dropped all the way down to 25 cents. And if I were to sell it, then I just lost that much money on it. The market does indeed evaporate from the stock market. It's not the same value all the time and just changing hands all the time. So that's another ridiculous point. But hey, he's just a comedian. Whatever.
Welcome to Nate's class.
Yeah. All right. That's all.
I bet we could never get Bill Burr on to debate.
No.
Something
no, we
like
could
this.
not.
He'll say, I'm not an expert.
Mm-hmm. Hey, I'm just a comedian.
That's it. All right, y'all. Well, if you enjoyed today's episode, please share it around with your friends and family. Leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Go to godhatesfeds.com or joingml.com. Pick up some merch and join the Fed Haters Club. Visit the links in the show notes to support the sponsors that support this show. And if you do all of that, then we'll be back again tomorrow for some Dumb Bleep of the Week. Until then, I hope you have a good day and a good morning, Liberty.